The rabbit's blood was still warm on her fingers as she tore into it. 2 days of hunger had silenced any disgust she might have felt at eating raw meat. Emily Parker didn't know how to make a fire, just one more survival skill she lacked. The small animal had stumbled into her crude snare by sheer luck, the first food she'd had since the dried beef ran out. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, smearing crimson across her sunburned cheek. 3 weeks ago she'd been a household servant in St. Louis, enduring the daily cruelties of the Winthrop family. Now she was here, somewhere in the vast Texas wilderness, with nothing but a stolen kitchen knife and the tattered clothes on her. Back, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the barren landscape. Emily needed shelter before nightfall. The previous night's rain had left her shivering until dawn, and the wolves that howled in the distance seemed closer than before. She rose on unsteady legs, her once sturdy frame now gaunt from weeks of near starvation. That's when she saw him, a silhouette on the ridge above her, motionless as the stone beneath his feet. A mounted figure watching her, bow in hand. Emily clutched her knife, though she knew it would offer little protection. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the rider began his descent toward her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emily Parker had never learned to read, had never been taught to hunt or track or build shelter. The daughter of failed farmers who died of typhoid when she was 9, she'd been sent to work as a scullery maid in the Winthrop household. For 10 years, she'd scrubbed floors, laundered linens, and endured the wandering hands of Mr. Winthrop and the cutting words of his wife. "You're fortunate we took you in," Mrs. Winthrop would say. "What else could someone like you possibly do in this world? What indeed?" Emily had asked herself that question every day since she'd fled. The night she'd finally fought back, when young Master Richard Winthrop had cornered her in the pantry, had changed everything. His hands had been insistent, his breath heavy. With whiskey as he'd pushed her against the shelves, she'd grabbed the first thing she could reach, a heavy iron skillet, and swung. The sound of it connecting with his skull still echoed in her nightmares. She hadn't stayed to see if he was dead or merely unconscious. She'd grabbed a kitchen knife, some food from the pantry, and run into the night. With the money she'd saved over years, coins hidden in a jar beneath a loose floorboard in her attic room, she'd purchased passage on a westbound wagon train. Texas, the wagon master had said when she'd asked where they were headed. New beginnings for those willing to work for them. New beginnings. Emily had clung to those words during the weeks of travel. But 3 days into the journey across Texas, raiders had attacked the wagon train. In the chaos, she'd fled into the wilderness, carrying only what she had on her person: the knife, a water skin, and a small bundle of food. That had been 16 days ago. The first few days she'd followed the sun, hoping to reach a settlement, any settlement, but the vastness of the Texas plains had swallowed her whole. Landmarks seemed to shift and disappear. Water became her obsession, then her desperation. When she'd found the small creek 3 days ago, she'd wept with relief. Now she stood frozen, watching the mounted figure approach. He rode without saddle or bridle, controlling his paint horse with subtle shifts of weight and pressure from his legs. His black hair hung in 2 long braids, adorned with beads and feathers. The geometric patterns painted across his bare chest told stories Emily couldn't read. A Comanche warrior, she realized, remembering the whispered fears of the wagon train. Settlers! Emily gripped her knife tighter, though she knew it was futile. She'd heard stories of what happened to white women captured by Comanche. Death might be the merciful outcome. The warrior stopped 20 paces from her. His dark eyes assessed her carefully, taking in her ragged appearance, the blood on her face, and hands, the pathetic remains of the rabbit at her feet. His expression remained unreadable. "You eat like coyote," he said finally, his English accented but clear. "No fire, no cooking." Emily swallowed hard. I don't know how, she admitted, her voice cracking from disuse. This drew a raised eyebrow. White woman doesn't know fire, she shook her head. I don't know much of anything out here. The warrior dismounted in one fluid motion. Up close, Emily could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps in his late 20s. A web of scars crossed his right shoulder, and a knife hung at his belt alongside other tools she didn't recognize. You are lost? He asked. Yes, Emily whispered, very lost. Your people? Where? Dead, or back east? There was a wagon train, but... She gestured vaguely behind her. The warrior nodded slowly. Raiders, bad men. I found wagon bones 3 days. A north. He studied her for another long moment, then seemed to reach a decision. From a pouch at his waist, he produced something wrapped in leaves, offering it to her. Emily hesitated, then accepted. Inside was dried meat of some kind. Her stomach growled audibly. Eat, he said. Then we talk more. Emily didn't need to be told twice. The jerky was tough but flavorful, spiced with something unfamiliar. As she ate, the warrior moved with practiced efficiency, gathering dry grasses and small branches. Within minutes, he had constructed a small fire pit, using a method Emily had never seen before. A wooden stick spun rapidly between his palms against a flat piece of wood. He created a small ember. With careful nurturing and gentle breath, the ember became a flame, which soon grew into a small but steady fire. All the while, Emily watched, mesmerized by the simple yet critical skill she lacked. I am called Running Elk, the warrior said, feeding another twig to the growing flames. I'm Emily, she replied, finishing the last of the jerky. Emily Parker. Running, Elk nodded. Why Emily Parker walk alone in Comanche lands? This place... He swept his arm across the horizon. Not for those who cannot live on it. The truth of his words stung, but Emily couldn't deny them. I was running away, she admitted. I hurt someone who wanted to... She struggled to find the right words. Running Elk raised his hand, stopping her. I understand. Man with bad intentions. Yes, Emily said, relieved not to have to explain further. But now I'm lost, and I don't know how to survive out here. I've been trying to find a town, but... Nearest white settlement 4 days' ride? Running Elk said. You walking wrong direction, would never find it. Emily's shoulders slumped. 4 days on horseback meant at least 2 weeks on foot, and that was if she didn't get lost again. She'd be dead long before then. What will you do with me? She asked finally, voicing the question that had lingered since his arrival. Running, Elk considered her for a long moment. The fire cast dancing shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his cheekbones and the intensity of his gaze. My people and whites make peace 2 summers ago, he said. No war between us. Now, but peace is new. Fragile like spider's web. Some Comanche still hate all whites. Some whites still hate all Comanche. He poked at the fire, sending sparks into the darkening sky. I could take you to white settlement, or to my camp. Your camp? Emily asked. Surprised? Wouldn't that cause trouble? Maybe. Running Elk shrugged. But you have no skills, no knowledge of this land. You go alone to settlement. You die. Simple truth. There was no judgment in his voice, merely a statement of fact. Emily looked down at her hands, still stained with rabbit's blood, and knew he was right. I can learn, she said softly. If someone would teach me. Running Elk studied her face, searching for something. Whatever he sought, he seemed to find it. My mother was captured as child by Comanche, he said unexpectedly. She was white woman, like you, became Comanche, became my mother. She taught me English words, told me white ways, said someday this knowledge would be important. He stood, moving to his horse and retrieving a folded hide from behind his simple saddle pad. He returned and spread it beside the fire. Sleep now, he said. Tomorrow I show you how to make fire, how to find water. Then you decide. Go to White Settlement or come to Comanche camp." Emily stared at him, wondering if this was some elaborate trick. But the simple humanity of the offer, a fire, a blanket, a night's safety, seemed genuine. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Running Elk looked up at the first stars appearing in the twilight sky. "My mother said, 'Path you walk, not always path you choose. Maybe your path and mine cross for reason.'" He moved to the other side of the fire, settling cross-legged on the ground, his back straight, facing outward toward the darkness. "I will watch," he said simply. "You sleep." Exhaustion overcame Emily's fear. She wrapped herself in the offered hide, its soft leather still carrying the unfamiliar sense of smoke and horses and something distinctly human. As sleep claimed her, she realized this was the first time in weeks, perhaps years, that she felt something close to safe. Tomorrow would bring decisions and dangers, but tonight, beside a fire she couldn't have built, under the protection of a man whose people she'd been taught to fear, Emily Parker slipped into the deepest sleep she'd known since fleeing St. Louis. Running, Elk kept his vigil, one hand resting on his knife, watching the wilderness that was his home and her nemesis. The night was long, and the shadows held many secrets, but for now an unlikely peace settled over their small camp in the vastness of the Texas plains. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe. To our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dawn broke with a shock of color across the eastern sky. Emily woke to the smell of cooking meat, her stomach responding instantly. Running Elk crouched by a rekindled fire, turning strips of rabbit meat on a framework of green sticks. He had skinned and prepared her previous day's catch while she slept. "You waste good fur," he said, noticing her watching. "Rabbit skin useful." Emily sat up, wrapping the hide blanket around her shoulders against the morning chill. "I didn't know how to skin it properly," she admitted. Running Elk nodded, unsurprised. He removed the cooked meat from the fire, offering her the first piece. The properly cooked rabbit tasted incomparably better than her desperate raw meal of the previous day. "You make snare?" he asked, gesturing toward the remains of her crude trap nearby. Emily nodded. "I watched a man set one on the wagon train. Mine doesn't work very well. That rabbit was the first thing I caught." Running Elk seemed to file this information away. "So you watch, you learn. Good." He finished his portion of the meal quickly, then stood. "Come." First lesson. Emily followed him to his horse, which grazed peacefully nearby. From a skin pouch hanging from the simple riding pad, he withdrew several items: a small knife with a bone handle, a leather water pouch, and a bundle wrapped in soft hide. "These now yours," he said, handing them to her. "Tools for living." Emily accepted them hesitantly. "I can't take these. I have nothing to trade." Running Elk's expression remained serious. "You pay by learning, by staying alive." He unwrapped the hide bundle, revealing a collection of unfamiliar items: a curved bone tool, a piece of flint, a small iron striker, and a bundle of dried plant material. "Fire kit," he explained. "Most important tool." For the next hour, Running Elk demonstrated how to prepare a fire pit, arrange kindling, and use the flint and striker to create sparks. Emily's first attempts produced nothing but frustration, her unpracticed hands struggling to coordinate the unfamiliar movements. "Harder than it looks," she said, after the 10th failed attempt. "All important things are," Running Elk replied simply. On the 12th try, her spark caught the tinder. Under Running Elk's guidance, Emily nurtured the tiny flame until it grew strong enough to consume larger sticks. The sense of accomplishment she felt was disproportionate to such a simple task, but it was the first truly useful thing she'd learned in years. "Now you can make fire," Running Elk said with a slight nod of approval. not die of cold, not eat raw meat. They moved on to water next. Running Elk led her to a slight depression in the landscape that looked no different from a dozen others they'd passed. "Dig here," he instructed, handing her a sharpened stick. "Not deep." Emily obeyed, and after removing just a foot of soil, moisture began to seep into the hole. "Groundwater," Running Elk explained. "When no stream, no pond, you find low place. Dig. Water comes." He showed her how to filter the muddy water through layers of sand, gravel, and charcoal from their fire, producing water clean enough to drink. Another essential skill she'd never imagined existed. By midday, they had moved. On to tracking. Running Elk pointed out signs invisible to her untrained eye. Bent grass stalks, displaced pebbles, a single deer hair caught on a thorny bush. "Land speaks," he said, "if you learn language." The afternoon brought lessons in direction finding. Using the sun, stars, and natural features, Emily's head swam with new information, but she absorbed it eagerly, knowing her life depended on it. As the sun began its descent, Running Elk led her back to their camp. He had rebuilt the fire and was preparing a different kind of meal, roots and tubers he'd gathered, while teaching her to find water. "You think about choice?" he asked as they ate. "White settlement or Comanche camp?" Emily had been considering little else all day. The prospect of reaching a white settlement held its own dangers. An unmarried woman alone would face few options: domestic, service like she'd escaped, or perhaps worse professions. And if the Winthrops had reported her, there might be a price on her head. "Your people," she began cautiously, "would they allow me to stay, to learn more?" Running Elk considered her question carefully. "My band, led by Chief Greyhorse, more accepting than most, trade with whites sometimes, but you would be first white. Woman in our camp since peace treaty." He paused. "Would be difficult. Some would not trust you." "Do you trust me?" Emily asked. A hint of something, amusement perhaps, flickered across Running Elk's stoic features. "Trust must be earned. Like fire-making, takes practice." Emily looked down at her hands, already showing new calluses from the day's activities. "I want to learn more," she said finally. "I want to know how to survive here. If your people will allow it, I'd like to go with you." Running Elk studied her face for a long moment. "See-ti-tin-steep." "Decision made, then. We leave at dawn. 2 days' ride to camp." "Ride?" Emily glanced at his single horse. "You ride with me," he said matter-of-factly. "Cannot walk that distance." The implication of riding double with this man she barely knew should have alarmed her, but after a day under his tutelage, Emily found she was more concerned with practical matters. "Will your chief truly allow this?" she pressed. Running Elk fed another stick to the fire before answering. "Greyhorse listens before deciding. Will hear my words about finding you. Will see you wish to learn our ways." He looked up at her directly. "But must understand, if you come to camp, you live by Comanche rules. Work like Comanche woman. Learn our ways, not just survival skills." Emily considered this. What are Comanche women's duties? Set up teepees, prepare food, tan hides, make clothing, gather plants for medicine, for food. He gestured to the fire. "Keep home." Not so different from her duties as a housemaid, Emily thought, except for the essential fact that these skills promised independence rather than servitude. "I can work," she said firmly. "I'm not afraid of hard tasks." Running Elk nodded, apparently satisfied. "Sleep now. Dawn comes quickly." As Emily settled onto her borrowed hide blanket, a new thought troubled her. "Running Elk," she said hesitantly, "in your camp, would I be considered a captive?" The question hung in the air between them. Comanche raids and captive-taking were well known among settlers, part of the reason they were so feared. Running Elk's expression remained carefully neutral. "You come by choice, not taken in raid, not prisoner." He paused. "But not free to leave." Alone either. Too dangerous until you know enough to survive. So I would be— What? Emily pressed. Guest, he decided finally, under my protection, until you learn enough or until Grey Horse decides otherwise. It wasn't complete freedom, but it was more choice than she'd had at the Winthrops, and infinitely better than starvation in the wilderness. I understand, she said. Before settling down for his own rest, Running Elk took something from around his neck, a small leather pouch on a cord. Medicine bag, he explained, holding it out to her. For protection. Emily hesitated before accepting. The small token. Don't you need it? Made new one last moon, he said. This one served its purpose. Now yours. She slipped the cord over her head, feeling the weight of the small pouch against her chest. The gesture seemed significant, though she didn't fully understand its meaning. Thank you, she said simply. Running Elk nodded once, then moved to his position across the fire. That night, Emily dreamed of her parents' small farm, the last place she'd known anything resembling a home. In the dream, her mother was teaching her to grind corn, while her father repaired a fence in the distance. Simple skills for a simple life, all lost when typhoid took them both. She woke before dawn with tears drying on her cheeks, but also with a strange sense of anticipation. Today, she would begin a journey that her 9-year-old self could never have imagined. Into the heart of Comanche territory, guided by a warrior who had, for reasons she still didn't fully understand, chosen to help rather than harm her. Running. Elk was already awake, preparing his horse for travel. He glanced at her as she folded the hide blanket. Something in his expression suggested approval of her readiness to depart. Today you begin a new path, he said, tightening the simple braided rope that served as his horse's bridle. Ready? Emily touched the medicine bag at her throat and nodded. Ready. Riding double on Running Elk's paint horse proved less awkward than Emily had feared. He mounted first, then offered his hand to pull her up behind him. The horse, which he called Thunder Walker in his language, seemed unbothered by the extra. Wait! Hold here, Running Elk said, indicating his waist. When horse runs, lean with me, not against. Emily nodded, tentatively placing her hands at his sides. As Thunder Walker broke into a trot, then a smooth canter, she instinctively tightened her grip. The sensation of riding without saddle or stirrups was both terrifying and exhilarating. The landscape changed as they traveled northwest. The scrubby plains gave way to rolling hills, dotted with oak and mesquite. Running Elk pointed out landmarks as they rode. A distinctive rock formation, a stand of cottonwoods marking a stream, a distant mesa that served as a navigation point. Remember these places, he instructed. Land is map for those who can read. They stopped at midday near a spring-fed creek. While Thunder Walker drank and grazed, Running Elk showed Emily how to identify edible plants, wild onions, prickly pear fruit, and a root that tasted like sweet potato when roasted. Food grows everywhere, he explained. Most whites see nothing but empty land, blind to what's in front of them. During these rest periods, Emily began asking questions about the camp they were heading toward. Running Elk answered patiently, providing glimpses into a way of life entirely foreign to her. How many people in your band? She asked as they shared. A meal of dried meat and the gathered plants. Summer camp has 32 teepees, maybe 150 people, men, women, children, elders. He took a drink from his water pouch. In winter, sometimes smaller bands join together, then more. And where exactly are we going? Running Elk considered how to explain. Near what whites call Palo Duro Canyon. Good water, good hunting. Protected from winds and enemies. Enemies? Emily asked cautiously. Some white settlers, some Kiowa bands to north, some Comancheros, bad men who trade with anyone for profit. He shrugged slightly. Always enemies somewhere. As they continued riding, Emily's thoughts turned to more immediate concerns. The women in your camp, she began hesitantly. "Will they accept me?" Running Elk was quiet for a moment before answering. "Some will be curious, some will be suspicious. My mother's sister, Yellowbird, she will help. She remembers when my mother was brought to camp as captive, before she became Comanche." "Your mother," Emily said. "You mentioned she taught you English. Is she—" "She walks with ancestors now," Running Elk replied. "5 winters ago, fever took her." "I'm sorry," Emily said softly. A silence fell between them, broken only by Thunderwalker's steady hoofbeats and the occasional call of a hawk overhead. "Your parents?" Running Elk asked eventually. "Typhoid," Emily replied. "I was 9. No other family wanted me, so I went into service." Service? The word seemed to confuse him. "I worked for a wealthy family, cleaned their home, cooked their food, washed their clothes, in exchange for a place to sleep and meager food." Running Elk glanced back at her, his brow furrowed. "Like a slave?" "Not exactly," Emily said, though the comparison wasn't entirely wrong. "I was paid a small amount, but I couldn't leave, had nowhere to go." "But you did leave," he observed. "Yes," Emily said, her voice hardening slightly. "When the master's son decided I should provide other services." Running Elk nodded, seeming to understand without further explanation. "You fought back." "I hit him with a cast-iron skillet," Emily admitted. "Hard." A sound escaped Running Elk that might have been a chuckle. "Good weapon choice." By late afternoon, Running Elk became more alert, scanning the horizon frequently. Emily sensed the change in his posture. "What is it?" she asked. "We approach Comanche. Hunting grounds, scouts watch boundaries." He pointed to a distant ridge. "One there now, watching us." Emily squinted but could see nothing. "How can you tell?" Turkey Vulture circled twice, then changed direction. Something disturbed it. He raised his arm in a particular gesture, holding it for several seconds. "I've signaled we come in peace." Within minutes, a rider appeared on the horizon, approaching rapidly. Running Elk stopped Thunderwalker and waited. Emily felt her heart rate accelerate as the scout drew nearer. The approaching Comanche was younger than Running Elk, perhaps 18 or 19, with a single eagle feather in his hair. His expression was suspicious as he reined his horse to a stop several yards away. He spoke rapidly to Running Elk in Comanche. Running Elk responded calmly, gesturing occasionally toward Emily. The younger warrior's eyes widened, and he spoke again, his tone questioning and wary. "What's happening?" Emily whispered. "Swift Arrow asks why I bring white woman to our camp," Running Elk explained. "I tell him you were lost, starving, that you wish to learn our ways." Swift Arrow spoke once more, his gaze now fixed on Emily. "With undisguised distrust, he says you could be spy for soldiers or settlers." Emily met the young warrior's gaze directly. "Tell him I'm no one's spy. I was running away, not toward anything." Running Elk translated her words. Swift Arrow considered. Them then responded with a short phrase. "He will escort us to camp. Grey Horse will decide your fate." Running Elk clicked to Thunderwalker, urging him forward. "Do not show fear now. Courage respected, even from enemies." They rode in silence, Swift Arrow leading the way occasionally, glancing back as if to ensure they weren't playing some trick. The terrain grew more rugged, with rocky outcroppings that would provide excellent vantage points for watching the surrounding territory. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Emily caught her first glimpse of the Comanche camp. Nestled in a protected valley with a stream running through it, dozens of conical teepees formed a rough circle. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and horses grazed in a natural corral formed by the valley walls. Swift Arrow let out a series of whoops as they approached, alerting the camp to their arrival. People emerged from teepees and gathering areas, staring at the unusual sight of Running Elk returning with a white woman. Children pointed and called out questions. Women stopped their work to watch, expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. Warriors moved closer, hands near weapons, clearly protective of their community. Running Elk guided Thunderwalker directly to the largest tipi in the center of the camp. Outside stood an older man wearing a headdress of eagle feathers, his face deeply lined but his posture still straight and proud. "Chief Greyhorse," Running Elk murmured to Emily. He dismounted first, then helped Emily down. Her legs trembled, both from the long ride and from the weight of so many staring eyes. Running Elk approached the chief with his palm raised in greeting, speaking in their language. He gestured back to Emily occasionally during what seemed to be an explanation. Greyhorse listened impassively, his dark eyes occasionally flickering to Emily. When Running Elk finished speaking, the chief approached her slowly. "You come to Comanche land," he said in halting but understandable English. "Why?" Emily swallowed hard, aware that her answer would determine whether she was welcomed or driven away, or worse. "I was lost and dying," she said honestly. "Running. Elk found me. He showed mercy when he could have left me to starve. He has begun teaching me how to survive in this land." She paused, gathering her courage. "I ask permission to stay and learn more." Greyhorse studied her carefully. "Running Elk says you fight against man who would harm you, that you are brave but know nothing of our ways." "That's true," Emily admitted. "Why not go to white settlement?" Emily considered her answer carefully. "Because there, I would only be what I was before, a servant with no choices. Here, I could learn to be something more, something free." Her answer seemed to surprise the chief. He turned to a woman who had joined him, older, with strong features and intricate beadwork adorning her dress. "My wife, Tall Woman," Greyhorse explained. He spoke to her in Comanche, clearly asking her opinion. She responded at length, her gaze evaluating Emily from head to toe. Finally, Greyhorse turned back to Emily. "Tall Woman says you are too thin, too weak for Comanche woman's work." A murmur of agreement rippled through the gathering crowd. "But she says any woman who would rather face Comanche camp than return to white ways must have strong heart." He conferred briefly with several older men who had joined them, then announced, "You may stay 7 suns. Show us you can learn, can work. Then we decide if you stay longer." Relief washed over Emily. A week to prove herself was more than she dared hope for. "Thank you," she said, inclining her head respectfully. Greyhorse turned to Running Elk. "She is your responsibility. You found her, you brought her. Her actions are on your honor." Running Elk nodded solemnly. "I understand." As Greyhorse and the other leaders dispersed, the rest of the camp continued to watch Emily with open curiosity. Children edged closer, emboldened now that the chief had spoken. One small boy darted forward to touch her skirt, then ran back. To his laughing friends, an older woman approached, her grey-streaked hair in 2 braids, her face bearing a strong resemblance to Running Elk. "This is Yellowbird," Running Elk said. "My mother's sister." Yellowbird spoke no English, but her gestures made clear that Emily was to come with her. Running Elk nodded encouragingly. "Go. Yellowbird will show you where to sleep, give you proper clothes. Women's work starts at dawn." As Emily followed Yellowbird through the camp, she felt the weight of dozens of stares. She was a curiosity, a potential threat, and now a test of Running Elk's judgment. Her actions would reflect on him, potentially damaging his standing if she failed. Yellowbird stopped at a smaller tipi near the edge of the camp. She pointed inside, then at Emily, indicating this would be her shelter. The interior was simple. A sleeping mat of woven grasses, a small fire pit in the center, and little else. As Yellowbird left her to settle in, Emily sank onto the mat, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Through the teepee's smoke hole, she could see the first stars, appearing in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched over her desperate wanderings now witnessed the beginning of something entirely unexpected, 7 days to prove herself. 7 days to learn the ways of a people who had every reason to reject her. 7 days to show running elk his trust hadn't been misplaced. Emily clutched the medicine bag, still hanging around her neck, and whispered a prayer to whatever gods might be listening in this strange new world. Dawn arrived with sounds utterly foreign to Emily. The rhythmic pounding of a hide drum, children's laughter, horses nickering, and women calling to one another in Comanche. Her body ached from the previous day's ride, but she forced herself up, knowing what hung in the balance. Yellow Bird appeared at the teepee entrance carrying a bundle. She spoke rapidly in Comanche, gesturing for Emily to take the items. Inside the bundle, Emily found buckskin clothing, a simple dress adorned with minimal beadwork, soft moccasins, and a belt with small pouches attached. Through gestures and occasional English words, she seemed to have learned from Running Elk's mother. Yellow Bird indicated Emily should change. The buckskin felt strange against Emily's skin, rougher than cotton, but remarkably supple. The moccasins, though slightly large, were infinitely more practical than her worn-out boots. As Emily emerged from the teepee in her new attire, several women working nearby paused to stare. A few whispered behind their hands, while others merely looked curious. Yellow Bird shooed away the onlookers with sharp words, then led Emily toward the center of camp. A group of women sat in a circle, scraping hides stretched on wooden frames. Yellow Bird guided Emily to an empty spot, demonstrating how to use a bone scraper against the deer hide. The work required considerable strength, and Emily's first attempts merely skimmed the surface. An older woman across the circle laughed, saying something that made the others chuckle. Emily flushed, but continued trying, adjusting her grip on the scraper. Yellow Bird corrected her technique with firm hands, showing her how to use her body weight more effectively. By mid-morning, Emily's arms burned with fatigue, but she had managed to clean a small section of hide properly. Yellow Bird nodded with grudging approval before leading her to the next task, grinding corn between stones. Throughout the day, Emily was passed from one group of women to another, each teaching her a different aspect of Comanche women's work. Some were patient, others clearly irritated by her clumsiness. None spoke English except for a few words, making communication a challenge of gestures and demonstrations. Of Running Elk, she saw nothing. The men had apparently left on a hunting expedition at dawn. By sunset, Emily's hands were blistered, her back ached fiercely, and she had earned a new respect for the endurance of the Comanche women. They had been working from sunrise to sunset with few breaks, all while caring for children, preparing food, and maintaining the camp. Yellow Bird brought Emily a wooden bowl filled with stew, tender venison, wild onions, and unfamiliar roots that tasted earthy and sweet. After her meager diet of recent weeks, it was the most satisfying meal she could remember. As they ate outside Emily's teepee, Yellow Bird attempted conversation using the limited English she knew. "You work good." "For first day," she said haltingly. "Hands soft, we'll toughen." Emily nodded gratefully. "Thank you for teaching me." Yellow Bird's weathered face softened slightly. Running Elk say, "You have courage." "He's been kind to me," Emily replied, unsure how much the older woman understood. "My sister's son." Yellow Bird tapped her chest. "Good heart, like mother." They finished their meal in companionable silence. As Yellow Bird rose to leave, she pointed to Emily's blistered palms and made a rubbing motion, then pointed to a small pouch at her belt. "For hands," she explained. "Sleep, tomorrow harder." Alone in her teepee, Emily applied the salve from the pouch, a fragrant mixture of rendered fat and herbs that soothed her raw skin. Outside, she could hear the camp settling for the night. Mothers, singing softly to children, men talking around fires, the occasional barking of camp dogs. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. The enormity of what she had undertaken pressed on her consciousness. She was a white woman living among the Comanche, people her own kind feared and fought against. If settlers discovered her presence here, they might assume she was a captive, in need of rescue. If the military learned of it, they might consider her a traitor. And what of her own place here? 7 days to prove herself worthy of staying longer, but to what end? Would she ever truly belong, or would she always be the white woman, tolerated but never accepted? These thoughts circled until fatigue finally pulled her into dreamless sleep. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern. Dawn to dusk work alongside the Comanche women, each day bringing new tasks and challenges. Emily learned to dig wild turnips with a pointed stick, to weave baskets from reeds collected at the stream, to recognize healing plants that Yellow Bird stored in her medicine pouches. Her hands began to toughen, her muscles adapting to the demands. Though still clumsy compared to the Comanche women who had been performing these tasks since childhood, she worked without complaint and with growing competence. On the 4th day, the hunting party returned. Children ran to greet their fathers, while women prepared to process the deer and pronghorn antelope the men had killed. Emily watched from where she worked, stretching a hide on a wooden frame, as Running Elk dismounted. Several warriors clapped him on the shoulder. Evidently, he had been successful in the hunt. He spoke briefly with Chief Greyhorse before making his way toward Emily. The women around her grew quiet, watching the interaction with undisguised interest. "You still here?" Running Elk observed, his expression betraying a hint of approval. "Not run away yet?" "Where would I go?" Emily replied, continuing her work. Many white women would have found Buffalo Creek settlement by now, 20 miles east. Emily's hands paused. "There's a settlement that close." Running Elk nodded. "Yellow Bird tell you?" "No," Emily said truthfully. "No one mentioned it. Test," he explained. "See if you ask about white settlements, if you try to leave in night." Emily felt a flash of indignation. "You've been testing me?" "Chief Gray Horse tests," Running Elk corrected. "I knew you would." "Stay," he gestured toward her work. "Your hands learn quickly. Yellow Bird says your spirit learns slowly." "What does that mean?" "Means you work hard, but don't yet understand why we do things as we do." He glanced around at the women who were pretending not to listen. "Tonight, come to council fire. Time you learn more than just women's work." After he left, the women burst into animated conversation, several looking at Emily with new interest. Yellow Bird approached, her expression unreadable. "Council fire," she said slowly. "For important talk. Women listen, not speak." She pointed to Emily. "You, special honor or trouble." That evening, Emily sat at the edge of the large council fire, acutely aware of her outsider status. The warriors sat in the inner circle, with Chief Gray Horse at the center. Behind them, women and older children formed an outer ring. Several of the men looked displeased at Emily's presence, but none challenged Gray Horse's apparent decision to include her. Running Elk sat at Gray Horse's right, his position suggesting a higher status than Emily had realized. The firelight played across his strong features as he listened intently to an older warrior speaking about signs of Kiowa hunting parties to the north. Much of the discussion occurred in Comanche, with Running Elk occasionally translating key points in a low voice for Emily. The council covered practical matters of the band's security, hunting grounds, and plans for the approaching autumn season. "Soon buffalo hunt," Running Elk explained. "Very important. Winter meat, winter hides." As the council progressed, a warrior Emily recognized as Swift Arrow, the scout who had first encountered them, began speaking heatedly, gesturing in her direction several times. The atmosphere around the fire tensed. "What's he saying?" Emily whispered. Running Elk's jaw tightened. "He says white soldiers seen near 3 hills, says having white woman in camp dangerous now." Chief Greyhorse raised his hand, silencing Swift. "Arrow, He spoke at length, his dignified voice carrying authority that needed no translation. When he finished, several of the older warriors nodded in agreement. "Chief says danger always exists," Running Elk translated. "But band must not make decisions from fear. Says you stay until 7 days complete, as promised." Swift Arrow did not appear satisfied, but offered no further argument. The council soon moved on to other matters. Later, as the formal council disbanded, and smaller groups formed around the fire, an elderly man approached where Emily sat. His face was deeply lined, his hair completely white, a rarity among the people she had seen thus far. Running Elk joined them, introducing the man as Seas Beyond, the band's medicine man and oldest member. "He wishes to speak with you." Running Elk explained, "Rare honor." Seas Beyond studied Emily with rheumy eyes that nonetheless seemed to penetrate her very soul. He spoke softly in Comanche, pausing frequently for Running Elk to translate. "He says he has dreamed of you," Running Elk said, looking somewhat surprised. "Says a white spirit woman came to him 3 moons ago, walking between 2 worlds." Emily shifted uncomfortably. "What does that mean?" After Seas Beyond spoke again, Running Elk continued. "He says you carry old pain like heavy stone. Says stone can be foundation or burden, your choice which." The old man reached out with gnarled fingers, touching the medicine bag at Emily's throat, the one Running Elk had given her. He smiled and nodded, speaking again. "He says I chose well," Running Elk translated, a hint of pride in his voice. "Says medicine bag holds proper protection for one walking difficult path." Seas Beyond took Emily's hand in his, turning it palm up to examine the blisters and calluses forming there. He spoke once more, at greater length. "He says, your hands. Tell truth your mouth might hide," Running Elk explained. "Says you work to belong, not just to survive. Different from most whites who come to Indian lands." The medicine man released her hand and said something directly to Running Elk, who nodded respectfully. Seas Beyond then shuffled away to join a group of elders at another fire. "What else did he say?" Emily asked, sensing Running Elk had not translated everything. Running Elk hesitated. "He said I should continue teaching you, that you have purpose here." He seemed uncomfortable with the word. Old man sees things others cannot. Sometimes true, sometimes just old man's dreams. Emily watched the medicine man's retreating figure. "Do you believe him?" "I believe you still have much to learn." Running Elk answered diplomatically. 3 more days until Grey Horse decides. Make them count. As they parted for the night, Emily sensed subtle shifts in the camp's dynamics. Some, like Seas Beyond, seemed to view her presence as meaningful. Others, like Swift Arrow, saw her as a threat. Most remained cautiously neutral, waiting to see what she would prove to be. Her limbs heavy with exhaustion, Emily retired to her teepee. Outside, a light rain began to fall, drumming gently on the hide covering. 3 more days to demonstrate her value, her commitment. 3 more days until Chief Grey Horse would decide if she could stay or must leave. The medicine bag felt warm against her skin as she drifted towards sleep, wondering what dreams might come to a woman caught between worlds. Dawn of the 5th day broke with unusual activity in the camp. Warriors painted their faces with ochre and black, horses were being prepared, and women packed dried meat and water pouches into small bundles. Emily emerged from her teepee to find Yellowbird waiting for her, more animated than usual. "Buffalo seen," she explained in her limited English, making horned gestures above her head. "Men hunt today." Emily followed Yellowbird to where other women were gathering, their excitement palpable. A successful buffalo hunt meant abundant meat, hides for new teepees, bones for tools, and security for the coming winter. Running Elk appeared, his face bearing red and black stripes, a single eagle feather tied into his hair. He carried a bow, and a lance decorated with feathers and fur tufts. "You come," he said to Emily, surprising both her and Yellowbird. "Watch hunt. Learn." Yellowbird protested in rapid Comanche, gesturing emphatically. Running Elk responded calmly but firmly. Finally, Yellowbird threw up her hands in exasperation and stalked off. "What did she say?" Emily asked. "Says buffalo hunt no place for white woman. Too dangerous, too sacred." Running Elk adjusted his bow. "I say, you cannot understand our ways without seeing important things." Emily felt a surge of gratitude for his continued willingness to teach her. "Will Chief Greyhorse allow it?" Already spoke to him. "You ride with my cousin, Clearwater." He pointed to a younger man preparing a horse nearby. "Stay on ridge above hunting grounds. Watch only." Clearwater approached, leading a paint mare similar to Running Elk's Thunderwalker. Unlike some of the warriors, his expression contained no hostility toward Emily, only curiosity. Clearwater speaks some English, Running Elk explained. Trades with settlers sometimes. He will explain what you see. Emily nodded her thanks to both men. "I won't cause any trouble." Running Elk's mouth quirked in what might have been a suppressed smile. Too late for that promise. The hunting party assembled at the edge of camp, 20 warriors on their best. Horses carrying bows, lances, and a few precious firearms obtained through trade. Chief Greyhorse addressed them briefly before they mounted, his words clearly containing ritual significance from the way the men responded. Clearwater helped Emily onto his mare, then mounted behind her. Unlike her journey with Running Elk, this arrangement felt awkward, but she focused on the honor being granted rather than her discomfort. They rode west for nearly 2 hours, the excitement among the warriors growing as scouts returned with reports of the buffalo herd's location. Eventually, Clearwater guided his mare up a ridge overlooking a broad valley. Below, dark shapes dotted the grassland, hundreds of buffalo grazing peacefully. "You stay here," Clearwater instructed, helping Emily dismount. "Good place to watch. Safe." His English was more accented than Running Elk's, but clear enough. "When will they start?" Emily asked, scanning the valley for the hunting party. Clearwater pointed to scattered positions where warriors had concealed themselves downwind of the herd. "Wait for signal from Greyhorse. Then—" He made a rushing gesture with his hand. Emily settled on a rock outcropping, mesmerized by the scene below. The massive creatures seemed almost prehistoric, with their shaggy heads and powerful shoulders. She had seen buffalo once before, from a train window, but never this close, never in such numbers. Clearwater squatted beside her, explaining in simple terms the strategy the hunters would employ. Surround slow, not spook buffalo. When gray. Horse signal, ride fast, shoot best targets, fat cows, young bulls, not old bulls, meat tough, hide too thick. A bird call echoed across the valley, not a natural sound but a signal. The buffalo nearest the sound raised their heads, suddenly alert. "Watch now," Clearwater murmured. The warriors burst from their hiding places, converging on the herd from multiple directions. The buffalo bolted, their thunderous movement shaking the very ground beneath Emily's feet, even at this distance. What had seemed like ponderous beasts transformed into a fluid mass of speed and power. The Comanche hunters were magnificent. They rode with otherworldly skill, controlling their horses with leg pressure and weight shifts, leaving their hands free for weapons. They raced alongside chosen targets, loosing arrows at the precise moment to penetrate behind the shoulder blade into the animal's heart and lungs. Emily gasped as she spotted Running Elk, recognizable by his paint horse and the eagle feather. He rode directly into the charging herd, seemingly fearless as buffalo stampeded on all sides. She watched him take down a large cow with a single arrow, then immediately target another. "He best hunter," Clearwater said proudly. "My cousin learned from our grandfather, very honored in tribe." The hunt unfolded with a mixture of chaos and precision. Some warriors used lances for the kill, driving the points deep while at full gallop. Others fired rifles, the reports barely audible over the thunder of hooves. Buffalo fell one after another, each kill accompanied by shouts of triumph. But the hunt held dangers too. Emily cried out as one warrior's horse stumbled, sending its rider tumbling dangerously close to the stampeding herd. Two hunters immediately broke off their pursuit to rescue their fallen brother, displaying the tight-knit cooperation that kept the band alive. Within half an hour, it was over. The remaining buffalo disappeared over a distant rise, leaving behind 23 carcasses dotting the valley floor. The warriors regrouped, raising their weapons and voices in what Clearwater explained was a prayer of thanksgiving to the buffalo spirits. "Now women's work begin," he said, helping Emily remount. "They come soon to process meat, hides, many days of work." As they rode down to join the hunters, Emily saw Running Elk speaking with Grey Horse, both men's faces flushed with exertion and triumph. Running Elk spotted her and raised his lance in greeting, his expression more open than she had yet seen it. "Good hunt," he called as they approached. "Many buffalo give themselves to Comanche today." Emily was struck by his choice of words. Not that the Comanche had taken the buffalo, but that the animals had given themselves. It spoke to a relationship with the natural world fundamentally different from the white settler's perspective. "It was amazing," she replied honestly. "I've never seen anything like it." Grey Horse studied her reaction, then spoke to Running Elk in Comanche. Running Elk translated, "Chief asks if you understand now why buffalo is sacred to our people." Emily considered her answer carefully, aware of its importance. "I think I'm beginning to understand. The buffalo gives everything: food, shelter, tools, clothing. Without it, your people would struggle to survive." Grey Horse nodded slightly, apparently satisfied with her response. He spoke again, and this time Running Elk looked surprised before translating. "Chief says you will help with buffalo processing. Not just watch, but work alongside women. Says, if you wish to be part of camp, must take part in most important work of all." Emily recognized both the honor and the test in this instruction. "I would be grateful to learn." By midday, the women of the camp had arrived with travois, A-frame structures pulled by horses for transporting the meat and hides. They set to work immediately with practiced efficiency, each knowing her role. In the complex process, Yellowbird assigned Emily to work with two younger women, skinning one of the smaller buffalo cows. They demonstrated the precise cuts needed to remove the hide intact, a valuable resource that would become tipi covers, clothing, and containers. The work was gruesome and exhausting. Blood covered Emily's arms to the elbows, and the smell of fresh kill filled her nostrils. But she worked without complaint, following Yellowbird's instructions and learning from the other women's example. As the sun reached its zenith, Emily paused to drink from her water pouch. Looking up, she saw Swift Arrow watching her from where he stood with several other young warriors. His expression was unreadable, but his attention felt significant. Yellowbird noticed the exchange and snorted. Swift Arrow watched too much. Work too little, she muttered in English. Then with a sidelong glance at Emily, she added, "He think Running Elk make mistake bringing you. Want to prove it." "And what do you think?" Emily asked, returning to her work. Yellowbird considered the question, her weathered hands never pausing in their skilled butchering. "Think you'd try hard, more than expect." She pointed to Emily's bloody hands. "These not servant hands anymore, becoming Comanche hands." The simple observation touched Emily deeply. Coming from Yellowbird, who had initially seemed so skeptical, it felt like genuine progress. The buffalo processing continued until dusk, with only a portion of the work completed. The remainder would take several more days, smoking meat for preservation, scraping and tanning hides, rendering fat, and creating pemmican for winter stores. As they prepared to return to camp, leaving guards to protect the remaining carcasses. From wolves and scavengers, Emily found herself walking beside running elk. "Your hands have no blisters today," he observed, nodding toward her blood-stained but intact skin. "They're toughening," she replied. "Yellowbird salve helped." Running elk nodded. "Body learns first. Mind follows. Spirit learns last." "And have I learned enough?" Emily asked, the question that had haunted her these 5 days finally surfacing. "2 more days until Grey Horse decides." Running elk was quiet for several strides before answering. "Buffalo gave themselves to feed Comanche today. You gave yourself to help prepare this gift." He glanced at her. "Chief Grey Horse sees this. I think your path becomes clearer." They walked in silence back to the horses. As Emily prepared to ride with clear water again, she noticed Swift Arrow approaching Running Elk. The young warrior spoke urgently, pointing toward the northwest. "Running." Elk's posture changed instantly, his relaxed demeanor giving way to alertness. He called to Grey Horse, and soon several warriors gathered in serious conversation. "What's happening?" Emily asked Clearwater as he helped her mount. "Swift Arrow see smoke signals from northern lookouts," he explained, his expression concerned. "White soldiers moving in Comanche territory." Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. The soldiers' presence could threaten not only the Comanche band, but her own precarious position between two worlds. As they rode back to camp under a darkening sky, Emily sensed the delicate peace she had been discovering might soon be tested. In ways none of them could predict, the camp transformed overnight. Where celebration of the successful buffalo hunt should have dominated, now tense preparation for potential conflict took precedence. Warriors gathered for council at first light, while women hastily packed essential belongings and prepared for quick movement if necessary. Emily helped Yellowbird dismantle her teepee, carefully folding the hide covering and breaking down the wooden poles. The older woman worked with practiced speed, her movements precise despite the urgency. "Where will we go?" Emily asked, securing a bundle of belongings to a travois. "Deep Canyon," Yellowbird replied, gesturing southwest. "Hidden place, good water, many caves." Running Elk appeared, his expression grave. He had traded his ceremonial hunting attire for practical leather leggings and a cotton shirt, likely acquired through trade with settlers. The incongruous garment reminded Emily of his dual heritage. "Chief wants to speak with you," he said to Emily. "Now." Yellowbird looked up sharply, but said nothing as Emily followed Running Elk to the center of camp. Grey Horse stood with several older warriors and Swift Arrow, who had apparently been the one to bring news of the soldiers. "Bluecoats search for someone," Running Elk explained quietly as they approached. Swift Arrow overheard them questioning. "Kiowa hunters. They seek white woman." Emily's heart stuttered. "Me? But how would they know?" "Not sure they seek you specifically," Running Elk clarified, "but any white woman in Comanche land would interest them." Grey Horse greeted them with a solemn nod. Using Running Elk as translator, he addressed Emily. "Directly, Chief asks if soldiers have reason to pursue you, if you committed crime among your people." Emily considered her answer carefully, aware that the truth might determine not only her fate, but potentially that of the entire band. "I struck a man who tried to force himself on me," she admitted. "The son of my employer, a wealthy, influential family. He may have died from the blow. If he lived, they would still want me punished." Running Elk translated. Grey Horse's expression remained neutral, but several of the other warriors nodded with what appeared to be approval of her actions. "Chief asks if these soldiers would be looking for you specifically, or if they seek any white person living with Comanche." "I don't know," Emily answered honestly. "If the Winthrops reported me missing or dead, and then a white woman was seen with Comanche, they might connect the events." Swift Arrow spoke rapidly in Comanche, his tone urgent. Running Elk responded sharply, and the younger warrior fell silent. "What did he say?" Emily asked. Running Elk's jaw tightened. He says you bring danger to camp. Says you should be sent away before soldiers find us. Is that what Grey Horse thinks? Emily asked, looking directly at the chief. After Running Elk translated, Grey Horse considered for a long moment before responding. Chief says Comanche do not abandon their own unless individual chooses dishonorable action. Running Elk paused. Says you have worked alongside women of tribe, have shown respect for our ways, have not tried to escape. Emily felt a surge of gratitude toward the chief. Thank him for me. I would never deliberately bring harm to people who have shown me kindness. After her words were translated, Grey Horse nodded once, then issued a series of commands to the gathered warriors. They dispersed quickly to carry out his orders. We move camp immediately, Running Elk explained, to hidden place in canyon system. Difficult for soldiers to find, with many escape routes if needed. And me, Emily asked. You come with us. Help women with moving camp. Stay close to Yellow Bird. He met her eyes directly. But understand, if soldiers find a situation becomes complicated, Grey Horse will not surrender you, but also cannot risk entire band for one person. Emily understood the implicit message. If conflict seemed inevitable, she might need to give herself up to protect the people who had taken her in. I understand, she said quietly. I'll do whatever protects the band. Running Elk studied her face, seeming to find reassurance in her sincerity. Good. Now help Yellow Bird. We ride as soon as camp is packed. Within 2 hours, the entire encampment had been dismantled and loaded onto travois or pack horses. Emily marveled at the efficiency with which the Comanche could relocate. Their entire community, what would have taken white settlers days to accomplish, they managed in a morning. She rode with Yellow Bird, sharing a sturdy mare laden with household goods. Children too young to ride alone were secured in special carriers or rode with parents. Older people were given the gentlest horses. No one was left behind. Their route took them through increasingly rugged terrain, rocky outcroppings giving way to steep-walled canyons cut by ancient water flows. Warriors rode ahead and behind, constantly vigilant for signs of pursuit or danger. By midday, they reached their destination, a hidden valley accessible only through a narrow passage between towering rock formations. A spring bubbled from the canyon wall, forming a small stream that provided fresh water. Natural caves and overhangs offered shelter without requiring full tipi construction. Long ago hiding place, Yellow Bird explained as they unloaded the mare. Since grandfather's grandfather time, only Comanche know this place. The band settled into the emergency camp with practiced ease. Women established cooking fires in protected alcoves, while children were assigned to gather fuel and help with lighter tasks. Warriors positioned themselves as lookouts at strategic points surrounding the valley. Emily worked alongside Yellow Bird, setting up a temporary shelter using a hide cover stretched between the canyon wall and supporting poles. The physical labor helped distract her from the guilt weighing on her conscience. Had she brought this danger to people who had only shown her kindness? Late in the afternoon, Running Elk returned from scouting with Swift Arrow and 2 other warriors. They went directly to where Grey Horse had established the command position, reporting their findings in low, urgent voices. Yellow Bird noticed Emily watching the exchange. Go, she said with unexpected gentleness. Find out what happens. Important for you to know. Emily approached hesitantly, staying at a respectful distance until Running Elk motioned her forward. Soldiers follow buffalo hunt trail, he explained. His expression troubled. 2 days behind us, moving slow. 10, maybe 12 blue coats with Tonkawa scouts. The Tonkawa were traditional enemies of the Comanche, known for allying with white soldiers as scouts and trackers. Will they find this place? Emily asked. Not likely, Running Elk replied. We covered trail well, but... He hesitated. But what? They Have paper with woman's drawing. Show to Kiowa hunters. Ask if seen white woman with black hair, green eyes. He studied her face. Her dark hair and green eyes matching the description perfectly. Emily's breath caught. So they are looking specifically. For me, Grey Horse spoke and Running Elk translated. Chief asks how important this man you struck, why soldiers would search so far for one woman. Richard Winthrop's father has political connections, Emily explained. State officials, perhaps even federal. And the Winthrops are not people who accept defeat or humiliation. If Richard died or was permanently injured by a servant girl who escaped, she didn't need to finish the thought. Vengeance would be a powerful motivator for such people. Swift Arrow said something rapid and heated, gesturing toward Emily. She didn't need translation to understand his meaning. She should be sent away, surrendered to the soldiers. Anything to protect the band. Several older warriors shook their heads, clearly disagreeing with his assessment. One spoke at length, his weathered face solemn. Whitehawk says, Comanche do not give up those who have eaten our food and shared our fire, Running Elk translated. Says it would bring shame to band. Grey Horse listened to all perspectives before making his decision. When he finally spoke, his voice carried quiet authority that silenced all discussion. Running Elk turned to Emily. Chief says we wait. Hide here until soldiers pass through territory. If they find us, he will speak with them. Say no white woman here. They won't believe him, Emily said softly. No, Running Elk acknowledged. But it gives us time to hide. You deeper in canyon system. Caves go far into earth. Places soldiers would never find if they value their lives. The implications troubled Emily deeply. I don't want anyone risking their lives for me. These soldiers, they might not care that your people have made peace. Finding a captive white woman would give them excuse for violence. Not your decision, Running Elk said firmly. Grey Horse decides for band. You are under Comanche protection now. As the council disbanded, Emily walked with Running Elk toward the edge of the hidden valley. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the ancient stone walls. Why would Grey Horse take such a risk for me? She asked. I've only been with your people for 6 days. Running Elk considered his answer carefully. Comanche way is not like White way. We do not measure worth by time, but by heart. You work without complaint. Learn our ways with respect. Fight for your honor against man who would take it. He glanced at her. These things matter more than how many suns you have seen with us. They reached a ledge overlooking the valley below, where the band had established their temporary camp. Women tended small fires, children played quieter games than usual, and warriors maintained vigilant watch over the narrow canyon entrance. My life before this, Emily said softly. I was nothing, a servant girl without family, without prospects, without even the basic skills to survive alone. She gestured toward the camp. Now I've brought danger to the only people who have shown me true kindness. You bring only yourself, Running Elk countered. Soldiers bring danger. Winthrop family brings vengeance. You bring willing hands, learning mind. His perspective shifted. Something in Emily's understanding. She had been viewing herself as a burden, but perhaps that was a remnant of how the Winthrops had conditioned her to think. Tomorrow is 7th day, she realized suddenly. When Grey Horse was to decide if I could stay, Running Elk's mouth curved in a rare smile. Think decision already made. Grey Horse would not protect temporary visitor this way. The implication that she was now considered part of the band filled Emily with unexpected emotion. She had come seeking nothing more than survival, yet found something that felt remarkably like belonging. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait, Running Elk replied, his expression returning to seriousness. And prepare. For peace, if possible. For fight, if necessary. As they made their way back to the camp, Emily noticed Swift Arrow watching them, his young face troubled with conflicted loyalties. He was not wrong to fear what her presence might bring, she reflected. The soldiers' pursuit had placed the entire band in jeopardy. Whatever came next, Emily resolved, she would not be passive in determining her fate or in protecting those who had protected her. 2 days passed in tense vigilance. The Comanche band adapted to their temporary refuge with resilience, maintaining essential activities while staying alert for danger. Lookouts were posted day and night at the canyon's entrance and along the ridgelines, ready to signal at the first sign of approaching soldiers. Emily continued working alongside the women, but now with an added sense of purpose. Yellowbird had begun teaching her basic Comanche phrases and words, a significant shift from the woman's initial reluctance to engage with her. "Say again," Yellowbird instructed, pointing to a medicinal plant she was grinding into powder. "Ma-pi-a-po." "Ma-pi-a-po," Emily repeated carefully, mimicking the intonation. Yellowbird nodded, satisfied. "Good for fever, for wounds. Remember this, the older woman had been teaching her not just language, but practical knowledge of healing plants and their preparations, skills that could prove crucial in their current situation. The afternoon of the second day brought disturbing news. Swift Arrow returned from scouting with his face set in grim lines. He reported directly to Grey Horse, but his agitated gestures needed no translation. Something had changed. Emily was collecting water from the spring when Running Elk found her. His expression confirmed her fears before he spoke. "Soldiers closer than we thought," he said without preamble. "Found our main campsite. Following our trail now with Tonkawa. Trackers." Emily's hands tightened around her water skin. "How long before they find this place?" "Maybe 1 day, maybe less." Running Elk looked toward the narrow canyon entrance. "Depends on skill of trackers, how carefully we covered trail." "What will Grey Horse do?" "Council decides now." Running Elk hesitated. "You should come. Concerns you most of all." The council gathered in a secluded alcove. Grey Horse, the elder warriors, and several of the most respected women of the band, including Yellowbird. Emily felt acutely conscious of being an outsider as she took her place in the circle, yet the fact that she had been included at all signified her changed status. Swift Arrow spoke first, reporting what he had witnessed. Though Emily couldn't understand his words, his gestures painted a clear picture. The soldiers were methodically tracking the band, examining abandoned campsites, questioning other tribes, showing Emily's description to anyone they encountered. "When," he finished, Grey Horse turned to Running Elk, who had also been scouting. Running Elk's report seemed to trouble the gathering even more. "What did he say?" Emily whispered to Yellowbird, who sat beside her. "Say soldiers angry now," Yellowbird replied quietly. "Burn abandoned teepee at buffalo hunt site. Threaten Kiowa. Hunters not acting like peacetime soldiers." A cold dread settled in Emily's stomach. These were not men simply following orders to find a missing woman. They were punitive, aggressive, perhaps even operating outside their official mandate. Grey Horse opened the discussion to the council. Various perspectives were offered, some advocating for further retreat into even more remote territories, others suggesting splitting the band into smaller groups to confuse pursuers. Swift Arrow again argued for surrendering Emily to the soldiers, though his proposal received little support. Finally, Seas Beyond, the elderly medicine man, spoke. The council fell silent, listening with deep respect as he shared his thoughts. When he finished, Grey Horse turned to Running Elk for translation. "Seas Beyond says soldiers not truly seek justice," Running Elk explained to Emily. "Seek revenge, seek to show power over Indian people. If you surrender, you will not receive fair treatment, and soldiers will not leave Comanche alone after finding you. Will use opportunity to assert dominance, perhaps create incident, to justify breaking. Peace, Emily had suspected as much. The Winthrops wouldn't have sent men so far with orders simply to retrieve her. They would have demanded punishment, example-making. Grey Horse spoke next, his weathered face solemn. Running Elk translated his words carefully. Chief says band. Cannot stay in hiding forever. Buffalo meat must be processed properly or will spoil. Children need open space. Coming winter requires proper preparation. He paused. But band also cannot fight soldiers directly without breaking peace treaty, bringing more soldiers later. An older warrior named Stone Knife offered another perspective, which Running Elk translated as well. Stone Knife suggests deception. Let soldiers search empty canyon while band escapes in small groups, reunites at winter camp grounds near western mountains. This proposal generated significant discussion, with various modifications suggested. Emily listened intently, struck by the democratic nature of the council. Even women's voices were heard and considered, something rarely seen in white society. As the discussion continued, a plan began to form. The band would indeed split into smaller groups, taking different routes to their winter grounds. But first, they would create a false trail leading away from the canyon, one obviously made by a white woman traveling with Comanche. Running Elk explained the final strategy to Emily. You, me, Swift Arrow, and 2 others will leave clear trail heading north. Make soldiers think small group broke away from main band. Lead them away from women, children, elders. A decoy, Emily said, understanding immediately. Running Elk nodded. While soldiers follow our trail, rest of band travels west in small groups, harder to track. We lead soldiers on long chase, then circle back to meet band at winter grounds. It's dangerous, Emily observed. If the soldiers catch up to us, yes. Running Elk acknowledged. Risk exists, but protects many by endangering few. Grey Horse addressed Emily directly. Though she couldn't understand his words, the gravity of his expression conveyed his meaning. When he finished, Running Elk translated, Chief says, choice must be yours. You are now considered part of band, but this mission brings great danger. You can instead go with Yellowbird's group, more hidden, safer path. Emily looked around the council circle. These people had taken her in when she was starving and helpless. They had taught her, protected her, and now considered her one of their own. The choice seemed clear. I'll go with Running Elk, she said firmly. The soldiers are looking for me. My presence will make the false trail more convincing. After Running, Elk translated approving murmurs rippled through the council. Even Swift Arrow, who had consistently opposed her presence, gave a grudging nod of respect. The council concluded with Grey Horse offering what seemed to be a blessing or prayer. The band would depart at first light, the decoy group heading north, while the others scattered westward in small family units. As Emily helped Yellowbird prepare for the journey, the older woman was uncharacteristically subdued. You choose dangerous path, she said finally. Could die. I know, Emily replied, but it feels right. I've been running and hiding my whole life. This time, I'm choosing to face the danger, not just for myself, but for others. Yellowbird studied her face, then reached into her medicine pouch. She withdrew a small object wrapped in soft leather, pressing it into Emily's hand. Special medicine, she explained, from my mother. Very powerful. Keep safe. Emily unwrapped the bundle to find a small carved stone figure, abstract but recognizable, as a woman with arms outstretched. Protection spirit, Yellowbird said. My mother give to me when I first woman. Now I give to you. The gesture left Emily speechless. This was no small gift. It was a precious family heirloom, something Yellowbird had likely treasured for decades. I can't take this, she protested. Yellowbird closed Emily's fingers around the carving. You return when we meet at winter camp, she said with firm confidence. Until then, protection travels with you. That evening, as final preparations were made, Emily sought out Running Elk. He was checking his weapons, a Winchester rifle acquired through trade, his traditional bow, and a knife with a finely worked bone handle. "How long will we need to lead the soldiers away?" she asked. Running Elk tested an arrow's straightness before returning it to his quiver. 3 days minimum. Give band time to scatter, cover trails, maybe longer if soldiers persistent. And Swift Arrow. Is he comfortable with this plan? Not comfortable, Running Elk admitted, but sees necessity, knows I choose him because he is best tracker besides me. He glanced at her. Also best fighter among younger warriors. Emily nodded, understanding the strategic thinking. When do we leave? Before dawn. Take only what we need. Food, weapons, water. Must travel fast. He paused in his preparations. You should rest now. Long ride tomorrow. Emily hesitated, then asked the question that had been troubling her. Running Elk, why did you really bring me to your camp that first day? You could have just taught me basic survival skills and pointed me toward a settlement. He seemed surprised by the question. Told you then, recognized something in you. What exactly? Running Elk considered her thoughtfully. Person without place, like my mother when Comanche found her. He set his weapons aside. Also saw determination. Will to live stronger than fear, rare quality. I was just desperate, Emily said softly. Desperation without courage leads to poor choices, Running Elk countered. You made good choice, hard choice, every day since. His assessment touched something deep in Emily. She had spent most of her life being told what she couldn't do, what she wasn't worthy of. Running Elk had been the first person to see capability in her rather than limitation. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said, thank you for finding me that day, for giving me a chance to be more than just a starving, helpless woman. Running Elk nodded once, accepting her gratitude without diminishing it. Sleep now, he said. Tomorrow we become the hunters, with soldiers as prey. As Emily settled into her temporary shelter for the last time, she reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. A month ago, she had been a domestic servant, with no options. Then, a desperate act of self-defense had sent her fleeing into the wilderness with no skills to survive. Now she prepared to ride with Comanche warriors, deliberately drawing danger away from a band she had come to care for deeply. She had learned more in 7 days with these people than in years of servitude. Not just survival skills, but something about her own worth. The small stone figure Yellowbird had given her pressed against her palm, cool and somehow reassuring. Tomorrow would bring danger, perhaps even death, but for the first time in her life, Emily Parker would face whatever came on her own terms, with people who valued her courage rather than her obedience. It was, she realized, a kind of freedom she had never imagined possible. Dawn had barely begun to lighten the eastern sky when Emily mounted the pinto mare Running Elk had selected for her. After weeks of instruction, she could now ride confidently without saddle or bridle, controlling the horse through leg pressure and weight shifts as the Comanche did. Their small party gathered at the hidden canyon entrance. Emily, Running Elk, Swift Arrow, and 2 warriors named Tall Reed and Black Fox. Each carried minimal supplies, focused on speed rather than comfort for the journey ahead. As they prepared to depart, Grey Horse approached. He spoke briefly to each warrior before turning to Emily. To her surprise, he addressed her in halting English. You ride with brave heart, he said, touching his chest. Return to us when path is safe. Emily nodded solemnly. Thank you for accepting me into your band. Grey Horse reached up, placing his palm against her cheek in a paternal gesture. Then he stepped back, raising his hand in farewell, as Running Elk led their small group out of the canyon and into the dangerous world beyond. They rode north at a deliberate pace, making no attempt to hide their trail. In fact, they did the opposite, breaking branches at consistent heights, leaving clear hoofprints in soft earth, even marking trees with knife cuts that would be obvious to trained trackers. "We make easy path," Running Elk explained. "Want soldiers to follow us, not search for others." Swift Arrow rode ahead as their scout, his earlier resentment toward Emily seemingly set aside in the face of their shared mission. The other two, warriors Tall Reed and Black Fox, maintained vigilant watch of their flanks and rear. By midday, Swift Arrow returned with news. "Soldiers found canyon entrance," he reported through Running Elk's translation. "Following our trail now. 10 men, with Tonkawa guide." Running Elk nodded, unsurprised. "Good. Now we increase distance, lead them farther from band." They rode harder through the afternoon, pushing into terrain that grew increasingly rugged. Emily's body ached from the unaccustomed exertion, but she refused to complain. Her comfort meant nothing compared to the safety of the children and elders now making their way west. That evening, they made camp in a defensible position, a small rise that offered clear sightlines in all directions. They built no fire, eating dried buffalo meat and pemmican instead. "How far behind are they?" Emily asked as they shared their cold meal. "Half-day's ride," Running Elk estimated. "We'll camp soon, continue at dawn." "And tomorrow?" Running Elk pointed. "Northeast. We cross Blue River, difficult crossing. Soldiers will be slowed, must find safe ford for horses." Their strategy was working exactly as planned, drawing the pursuers away from the main band. Yet Emily couldn't suppress a growing sense of dread. Every mile they traveled increased the distance from their eventual destination. The return journey would be long and potentially dangerous. She slept fitfully that night, waking at every sound. Before dawn, they were moving again, maintaining their deliberately obvious trail as they pushed northeast. By mid-morning, they reached the Blue River, swollen from recent rains, its current swift and dangerous. Running Elk scouted briefly before. "Finding a crossing point, water deep," he warned Emily. "Stay close to my horse." One by one, they urged their mounts into the churning water. Emily's mare balked initially, then plunged forward. The cold shock of the water stole her breath as it rose to her waist. She clung to the horse's mane, guiding it toward Running Elk's position just ahead. Halfway across, Swift Arrow's horse lost its footing, slipping downstream. With remarkable horsemanship, he guided the animal back toward shallower water, regaining control before disaster struck. They emerged on the far bank, soaked but intact. Running Elk pointed to a rocky outcropping nearby. "Rest horses there," he instructed, "then continue." As they approached the rocks, Black Fox suddenly raised his hand in warning. He dismounted, examining the ground carefully before speaking to Running Elk in urgent tones. "Tracks," Running Elk translated for Emily. "Fresh, not our people." Swift Arrow circled wider, returning quickly with grim news that required no translation. He held up 4 fingers, then made a chopping motion across his forearm, the sign for Comancheros, mixed-blood bandits who operated in the borderlands, notorious for their brutality. Running Elk's expression darkened. "We go another way," he decided. "Comancheros dangerous to everyone. White Comanche, all people." They began to circle wide around the area, abandoning their direct northeastern route. Emily noticed a new tension among the warriors. Their vigilance intensified. Comancheros represented a threat beyond even the pursuing soldiers, unpredictable, driven by greed rather than law or duty. They had traveled less than a mile when rifle fire erupted from a rocky ridgeline ahead. Black Fox cried out, clutching his shoulder as blood bloomed across his buckskin shirt. Running Elk shouted commands, and they scattered, seeking cover in the sparse vegetation. Emily followed Running Elk's lead, sliding from her horse and pulling it down into a shallow depression. More shots rang out, bullets kicking up dirt nearby. "How many?" she gasped as Running Elk checked his rifle. 4, maybe 5, he replied grimly. "Ambush!" Swift Arrow and Tall Reed had taken positions behind. Boulders returning fire when possible. Black Fox had managed to reach cover despite his wound, his face tight with pain, but his rifle steady. Running Elk pointed to a cluster of rocks providing a route up the ridge. I circle behind. You stay here. Keep horse down. Before Emily could protest, he was gone, moving with remarkable stealth through the brush. She watched anxiously as Swift Arrow provided covering fire, allowing Running Elk to reach the rocks undetected. Long minutes passed with intermittent gunfire. Emily tended to her frightened horse, keeping it calm with soothing words and touches. Then a different kind of shout echoed from the ridge, Running Elk's war cry, followed by the sound of close-quarters combat. The shooting stopped abruptly. After a tense silence, Running Elk's voice called out in Comanche. Swift Arrow responded, cautiously emerging from cover. Emily waited, heart pounding, until Running Elk appeared at the ridgeline, motioning them forward. "Clear now," he called. "4 Comancheros, no more." They gathered on the ridge, where 4 bodies lay. Running Elk had surprised them from behind, using knife and tomahawk with deadly efficiency. Emily averted her eyes from the grim scene, focusing instead on Black Fox's injury. "Just muscle," Running Elk assessed after examining the wound. "No, bone. He can ride." They bound Black Fox's shoulder with strips torn from Emily's spare clothing. As they prepared to continue, Swift Arrow suddenly froze, looking toward the river they had crossed earlier. In the distance, unmistakable against the landscape, blue uniforms could be seen approaching the water's edge. The soldiers had caught up more quickly than expected. "They see fight," Running Elk said, noting the soldiers' increased pace. "Now they come faster, thinking we attack whites." Their plan had succeeded too well. The soldiers were fully committed to the pursuit, and now the encounter with Comancheros had further complicated matters. The soldiers would likely assume the Comanche had attacked innocent travelers rather than defended themselves against bandits. "What now?" Emily asked. Running Elk considered their options. "Cannot outrun with wounded man. Cannot fight soldiers without breaking peace treaty." He looked at Swift Arrow, who nodded in understanding. "What are you thinking?" Emily pressed. "One last deception," Running Elk explained. "Swift Arrow, Tall Reed, Black Fox ride north, still leaving clear trail. Draw soldiers away, and us, you and I, separate from group, double back toward winter campgrounds." He pointed southwest, toward distant mountains barely visible on the horizon. "Meet band there." It was risky, splitting their already small group, but Emily understood the strategy. The soldiers would follow the more obvious trail of 3 warriors, rather than look for 2 riders leaving minimal tracks. Swift Arrow spoke briefly to Running Elk, his earlier hostility toward Emily completely gone. When he finished, Running Elk smiled slightly. "He says you have proven yourself a worthy rider today," he translated. "Says when we meet at winter camp, he will teach you to shoot bow properly." Emily felt unexpectedly moved by this acceptance from her former critic. "Tell him I look forward to his instruction." They parted ways quickly, with minimal ceremony. The 3 warriors headed north, making no attempt to conceal their passage. Emily and Running Elk watched until they disappeared from view, then turned their horses southwest, beginning the long journey to rejoin the band. Running Elk led them on a circuitous route, using every technique to minimize their trail, riding in stream beds across rocky ground through dense brush that would quickly spring back after their passage. By nightfall, they had put considerable distance between themselves and both the soldiers and the site of the Comanchero ambush. They made cold camp in a small grove of cottonwoods. Running Elk checked their back trail one final time before settling. "Beside Emily, Swift Arrow and others will be safe," he assured her, seeming to read her concerns. "Draw soldiers far north, then circle west through Kiowa territory. Soldiers not follow there, too dangerous for small group." "And us?" Emily asked. 6 days to winter camp, if we ride hard. He studied her face in the moonlight. Journey not easy. I can manage, she said with confidence that was only partly feigned. I'm not the same helpless woman you found in the wilderness. Running Elk nodded. Truth. Now you make fire, find water, ride without saddle. Beginning of Comanche, woman. Beginning, Emily echoed, feeling the weight of the word. After a moment, she reached into her pouch and withdrew Yellowbird's carved stone figure. She said this would protect us on our journey. Running Elk examined the carving with evident respect. Powerful medicine. Yellowbird's mother was great. Healer, her protection not given lightly. Emily returned the figure to her pouch, then asked the question that had been lingering since their departure. When we reach the winter camp, what happens then? Running Elk was quiet for a long moment before answering. Winter camp is different. Families together, stories told, skills taught. He glanced at her. Good time for learning deeper ways. And, my place? Your place is what you make, he said simply. Yellowbird will continue teaching women's medicine. Others teach other skills. You learn, you work, you become more Comanche each day. And you? Emily asked, surprised by her own boldness. What will your role be in my life? Running Elk seemed equally surprised by the question. I found you, he said, as if this explained everything. When Emily continued looking at him expectantly, he elaborated. Finding creates responsibility. Teaching creates bond. Is that all? Emily pressed. A hint of something. Amusement, perhaps. Or uncertainty flickered across Running Elk's normally stoic features. Among Comanche, man does not speak directly of such things to woman, shows intentions through actions, gifts. Woman's family decides if match suitable. I have no family, Emily reminded him. Yellowbird claims you now, Running Elk countered. And Chief Greyhorse has interest in all band members' welfare. He adjusted his position, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. These discussions come later, after safe arrival, after winter. Emily accepted his deflection, recognizing the cultural boundaries she had approached, yet his response contained enough to confirm what she had begun to suspect, that Running Elk's interest in her went beyond simple responsibility or obligation. The following days brought punishing travel across increasingly challenging terrain. They rode from dawn until dusk, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses. Running Elk pushed their pace, concerned about both the pursuing soldiers and the approaching winter weather. Emily's body ached constantly, but she found a rhythm in the journey, a meditative quality to the endless hours on horseback. Running Elk continued her education even as they traveled, pointing out landmarks, teaching her to read weather signs, identifying plants and animal tracks. On the 6th day, as evening approached, they crested a rise overlooking a broad valley nestled between protective mountain foothills. Below, the winter camp spread before them, dozens of teepees arranged in family groups, smoke rising from cooking fires, horses grazing in natural pastures. Home, Running Elk said simply. As they rode into camp, people emerged from teepees to greet them. Emily searched the faces anxiously until she spotted Yellowbird, hurrying forward with uncharacteristic emotion. The older woman clasped Emily's hand as she dismounted, checking her for injuries before nodding with satisfaction. Kept medicine safe, Yellowbird observed, noting the pouch at Emily's waist. It protected us well, Emily replied, returning the carved figure to its rightful owner. As promised, Yellowbird shook her head, pressing the carving back into Emily's hand. Keep now, part of you. Chief Greyhorse welcomed them formally before the gathered band, acknowledging their role in protecting the others. Emily understood enough Comanche now to recognize, when her name was spoken, Not White Woman anymore, but Emily Who Rides Far, a name that acknowledged both her identity and her recent journey. That evening, as the band celebrated their safe arrival at winter grounds with music and storytelling, Emily sat beside Yellowbird near a central fire. The old woman was teaching her to string seed beads onto a complex pattern when Running Elk approached. He had exchanged his travel-worn clothes for clean buckskins and wore a single eagle feather in his hair. Without speaking, he placed a small bundle wrapped in soft deerskin before Emily, then withdrew to join the men at another fire. Yellowbird made a sound somewhere between amusement and approval. "Open," she instructed. Inside, Emily found an exquisitely crafted knife, smaller than a warrior's weapon, designed for a woman's hand, with a handle of polished antler inlaid with turquoise. "Beautiful," Emily breathed, admiring the craftsmanship. Yellowbird nodded with satisfaction. "First gift," she explained. "Proper beginning." "Beginning of what?" Emily asked, though she had begun to understand. Yellowbird's weathered face creased in a rare smile. "Of new path, for both of you." Across the fire, Running Elk glanced their way, his expression carefully neutral despite the significance of the moment. Emily met his gaze briefly, before returning her attention to the knife, a practical tool, yet also a symbol of something unexpected taking root. 6 weeks earlier, she had been a servant girl with no options, no skills, and no future. Now she sat among the Comanche as Emily Who Rides Far, with a place, a purpose, and possibilities she had never imagined. The wilderness that had nearly claimed her life had instead become the pathway to a new one. The knife in her hands, like the skills she had learned and the strength she had discovered, represented not just survival, but the freedom to choose her own destiny. As winter settled over the camp and the first snow began to fall, Emily looked up at the vast sky above, filled with more stars than she had ever seen in her life before fleeing St. Louis. Each one seemed to represent a possibility in this new world, where she was valued not for her servitude, but for her courage, her willingness to learn, and her determination to belong. The starving woman Running Elk had found in the wilderness was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who had found not just skills and education, but a home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.